Hi everyone, and welcome to KCS at Home, the summer edition. This video is for World History class, and the topic is the Cold War. If this video is hard to understand, here's a few things you can try. First, you can turn on closed captions if they are available. Second, adjust the playback speed to slow down the video. 3. Consider watching short clips, then pause, listen, and watch again. 4. Ask someone in your home to watch the video with you. Stop frequently and talk to your partner about what you heard and understood. My name is Miss Alexis Hall, and I am a teacher at L&N STEM Academy. Today we are going to work on answering this question. Who was primarily responsible for the Cold War? The United States or the Soviet Union? While you are watching this video, please follow along with the lesson on your Cold War Google Doc. So today we are going to do 4 things. First, we are going to review a timeline of some events from the early Cold War. Then you are going to read some primary source documents and answer questions about them. 3, you are going to write a hypothesis to answer the question. And 4, you are going to answer some discussion questions to process what you learned. So before we get started, I want you to take just a moment to think about this question. What do you already know about the Cold War? Maybe you've seen movies, read books, or had other classes where you've learned about the Cold War. Pause the video for just a second and think about all the things that you already know about the Cold War. So before we start talking about the Cold War, I want to do a little bit of a review on communism versus capitalism because it's very important to understanding the Cold War. So in communism, the government controls the means of production, and this is the type of economic system that the Soviet Union had. But in the United States, the economic system was capitalism. This is where private companies control the means of production, so goods and services are privately owned. The difference between communism and capitalism is just one of the many differences between the United States and the Soviet Union. These differences in political and economic values are part of what led to the Cold War. Now, let's talk about the origins of the Cold War. If you think back to World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union were allies. They worked together during the war. But after World War II, Europe was in ruins, and former colonial empires were crumbling. The United States and the Soviet Union disagreed on how to best fix Europe. This sets the scene for increased competition between the two world superpowers, the US and the USSR. The Soviet Red Army remained in Eastern Europe after the war, which led to the Soviet bloc. And at the same time, the United States developed policies of containment, in particular the Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan. Now it's time for you to do the first step of this lesson. Go to your Google Doc and find the Cold War timeline. While I'm going over the next few slides, please look at the timeline to follow along with me. In March of 1946, Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, traveled to America and described the situation in Europe. He used this metaphor called the Iron Curtain. So think about it like this. You have curtains in a window, but instead of being made of cloth, those curtains are made of iron. And this is how Winston Churchill described the divide between the Eastern Bloc and the Western Bloc. You are going to read this document in just a minute. President Harry S. Truman pledged that the United States would help any nation resist communism in order to prevent its spread. His policy of containment is known as the Truman Doctrine. Containment's goal is keeping communism only in the areas where it is already present. As part of the Truman Doctrine, the United States adopted the Marshall Plan. The United States gave $13 billion to European nations for rebuilding. Because of the Marshall Plan, communism is going to lose its appeal to countries who are vulnerable to it. In 1949, 10 European countries joined the United States and Canada to form an alliance called the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, otherwise known as NATO. The Soviet Union countered with an agreement with Eastern European countries in the Warsaw Pact in 1955. So now we are going to work on answering our essential question. Who started the Cold War, the United States or the Soviet Union? Over the past decades, historians have disagreed on this question. Today, we are going to look closely at some primary source documents from the Cold War in order to answer this question for ourselves. So now it is time to go back to your Google Doc and take a look at document A. This is the Iron Curtain speech. Go ahead and pause this video to read the document and answer the questions that are below it. Now that you've read document A, it's time for step 3, document B. This is the Truman Doctrine. You are now going to read the document and answer the questions that go with it. Go ahead and pause the video until you're ready. Now that you've read the first 2 primary source documents, you are going to record your first hypothesis. Remember, think back to science class. A hypothesis is an educated guess about something. So you are going to use the information that you have learned today and make an educated guess or a hypothesis about who was primarily responsible for the Cold War, the United States or the Soviet Union. Be sure to use evidence from the documents to support your claims. Go ahead and pause the video until you're ready. Now it's time to move on to step 5. This is document C, the Soviet Ambassador Telegram. Go ahead, pause the video, read the document, and answer the questions that go with it. And now we have one final document, document D, Henry Wallace. Read the document and answer the questions that go with it. Pause the video until you're ready to move on. And now it is time to record your second hypothesis. Now that you have more information, perhaps your opinion will change or it is strengthened by what you already knew. So answer the question, who was primarily responsible for the Cold War, the United States or the Soviet Union? Be sure to use evidence from the documents to support your claims. And now it is time for the last step of this lesson. You are going to answer the discussion questions that are on your Google Doc. Who was primarily responsible for the start of the Cold War? What evidence do you have to support your claim? Which of these documents do you believe is most trustworthy? Why? Did your hypothesis change? How and why? What other evidence would you need to strengthen your claim? I hope that reading these primary source documents and learning a little bit about the origins of the Cold War is just the beginning of you learning about this topic. There's so much more to learn here, and I encourage you to read and ask more questions and continue learning. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye!